come on up around. And if you could raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to provide this court and jury shall be the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? Thank you. If you don't mind, have a seat. And once you're comfortable and near enough to that microphone, if you could share with our court reporter your full name.
Speak into this microphone?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Larochelle.
And could you spell your last name for us?
Cautela.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Cautela.
Morning.
Ms. Cautela, are you currently employed?
No, I'm retired.
Retired, okay. And in April 2019, were you employed?
Yes.
Where were you employed?
I was employed at Student Transportation of America as a school bus driver.
Did you provide school bus transportation for students of the Matthew Thornton Elementary School in Londonderry?
Yes, I did.
Now, I'd like to direct your attention to April 2019. Did you drive the same bus route for your elementary school students every day?
Yes, I did.
Are you familiar with Ella and Gavin Argie?
Yes, yep. They are on my bus, first and third grade.
Okay, so they were on your school bus route?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember their address?
118 West Road.
Where was the bus stop for Gavin and Ella in relation to their house?
It was at the bottom of their driveway, which met West Road.
When you picked Ella and Gavin up for school, would they be by themselves?
No, they were usually always with their father. Once in a while, they were with their mother. But I never saw anybody else besides the father and the mother.
Okay. I'd like to direct your attention to April 4th, 2019. Do you recall working that day?
That's the Thursday?
Yes, April 4th, 2019. I can show you a calendar, though, if you would like, ma'am. Would you like to
I
see?
worked both those 2 days, the Thursday and the Friday that we're talking about.
Okay. Would you like to look at a calendar, ma'am?
Sure.
Sure, okay. My apologies. We have a big version of the calendar
Okay.
right here.
All right, good.
Okay. So I am directing your attention right here to
Yep.
April 4th, Thursday, April 4th. Did you work that day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Cautela, did your school bus have a video camera that recorded the door of your bus?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember providing the April 4th, 2019 school bus video to the elementary school?
Yes, the principal ordered my bus and asked me for it.
Okay, and you provided that video?
Yes.
Prior to today, did you have an opportunity to review a portion of that school bus footage as
Yes.
contained on State's Exhibit 13?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I'm now going to play about a 30-second clip from the school bus footage of State's Exhibit 13, and then I'll have some questions about that.
Okay.
All right, so who did we see getting onto your school bus in that video?
That was Ella and Gavin, the first and third graders.
Ms. Cautela, I'm now showing you State's Exhibit 18.
Yes.
And Ms. Cautela, do you see those images in State's Exhibit 18 on a larger version on this screen?
I see it.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to ask you a couple questions. Are these pictures still images from the school bus video that we just watched?
Yes.
Okay. And now, let's start with the picture on the top left-hand corner.
Okay.
Who is getting on the bus there?
That is Ella.
Okay. And here in the circled portion, can you explain what we're seeing here?
That would be the legs of the father.
Oops, I apologize. And the picture on the right-hand side, can you tell us in the top right-hand corner who we're seeing getting on the bus there?
That's Ella, followed by her brother Gavin.
All right, and now directing your attention to the picture at the bottom, who are we seeing getting on the bus there?
That's Ella.
Okay, Ella, and who else do we see in that bottom picture?
Actually, no, the bottom left is Gavin.
Okay, the bottom picture
Yep.
is Gavin. Okay, just one moment. All right, thank you, Ms. Cautela. I have no further questions.
Okay.
Okay, any questions from the defense?
No questions.
Okay, so ma'am, you're excused, you can stay. Oh, is the witness excused by both sides? Okay.
Yes,
You're
Your Honor.
excused, you can stay or leave as you choose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. When you,
Yes, if you'd like to stay in the courtroom, you can. If you want to leave, you can as well.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And if you choose to stay, if you want to switch back into a regular mask, feel free to do so.
Your Honor, the state calls Julie Maloney.
Hello, Ms. Maloney. If you could raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to provide this court and jury shall be the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? Thank you. Please be seated. And if you could get yourself close enough to that microphone so we can amplify, and if you could state your full name for our court reporter and spell your last name.
Julie Maloney, Maloney.
Good morning, Ms. Maloney.
Good morning.
Are you currently employed?
Yes,
Where are you employed?
the Londonderry School District,
In April 2019, where did you work?
Matthew Thornton School,
What was your position there?
first grade teacher.
Are you familiar with Gavin Argie?
Yes.
How are you familiar with him?
He was a student in my classroom.
Are you also familiar with Ella Argie?
Yes.
And how are you familiar with her?
She was a girl that was on my Girls on the Run team that I coached.
And are you familiar with whether Ella and Gavin Argie were brother and sister?
Yes, they are.
Okay. So I'd like to direct your attention to April 4th, 2019. Do you recall whether Ella and Gavin came to school that day?
Yes, they did.
Do you remember Gavin giving you a note that morning?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 90. Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize this?
It was given to me that day for
Okay.
pickup for the children.
And who gave that to you?
Gavin.
Up on the screen, is this a larger version of State's Exhibit 90 that I just provided to you?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to read it out loud, and then I'll have a few questions for you.
Okay.
Attention YMCA. Ella and Gavin Argie will both be picked up from after-school YMCA at 4:45 p.m. by their grandmother, Brenda Quinn. Her number, if needed, 603-762-0602. Thank you, Maureen and Bill Argie. Did I read that correctly?
Yep.
What is the YMCA after-school program referred to in this note?
After school YMCA.
So was there a program at the Matthew Thornton Elementary School?
Yes, it's an after-school program provided by YMCA that's housed in the cafeteria at our school.
Okay. What is the school policy regarding who can pick a child up from school?
It's they have to be listed in the emergency contacts, and a note can be provided to add them.
After you reviewed that note, what did you do with it?
I sent it to the office, so they would also be notified.
Do you remember what Gavin did after school on April 4th?
He went to the YMCA.
And at the end of the school day, how did he get to the YMCA program?
They walked down from the classroom down to the cafeteria at the school.
Do you remember what Ella did after school on April 4th?
Yep, she came over to the Girls in the Room program, which I had in the gym.
And when she was done with the Girls on the Run program that day, what did she do?
She walked from the gym to the cafeteria to go to the program after school.
Okay. I may have one moment, Your Honor. I have no further questions for you. Thank you.
Any cross-examination? No. Okay, and may this witness be excused by both sides?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Ma'am, you can step down, you can stay or leave as you choose.
Okay.
Up to you. Thank you.
Your Honor, the state calls Julia Hussey to the stand.
Good morning. If you could raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to provide this court and jury shall be the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? Thank you. If you don't mind, have a seat, and once you get close enough to that microphone and settled in your chair, if you could provide your full name to our court reporter and spell your last name.
My name is Julia Eva Hussey. That's Hussey.
Ms. Hussey, I can tell already, I'm going to ask you to get your voice up a little bit so that everybody in the courtroom can hear, okay?
All right.
I know it's awkward, but if you don't mind, just amplifying your voice. Thank you.
Good morning. Ms. Hussey, are you currently employed?
I am.
Where?
The YMCA of Greater Londonderry.
In April 2019, where did you work?
Same place, YMCA of Greater Londonderry.
And in April 2019, what was your position there?
I was a group lead, primarily at Matthew Thornton.
What does it mean to be a group lead?
It means that I am over the age of 18 and allowed to be left alone with up to 15 kids at the Y.
Okay. And how long did you work for the YMCA in that specific role?
I worked in that role for about 3 years total.
Where was the YMCA after-school program located?
At that time, it was in the Matthew Thornton school.
Was there a procedure for child pickup at the end of the day?
Yep. Most kids were picked up throughout the afternoon. We had a cutoff of 6 p.m. for parents to come pick up.
Are you familiar with Ella and Gavin Argie?
I am.
How are you familiar with them?
They were kids in that program.
How many years had you cared for Ella and Gavin at the after-school program?
From day one working there.
Were you familiar with their mother, Maureen Argie?
I was.
How about their father, William Argie?
I was.
Now, I'd like to direct your attention to April 4th, 2019. Do you recall whether you were working that day?
I was working that day.
Do you recall if Gavin attended the YMCA after-school program on that date?
He was there.
What about Ella Argie?
She was, too.
Prior to coming to the after-school program, did Ella participate in a different program that day?
I believe so.
Okay, and then she came to the after-school program after that?
Yes.
So on April 4th, 2019, do you remember who picked Ella and Gavin up from the YMCA program?
It ended up being my grandmother.
Was that typical?
No.
Do you remember who routinely picked them up?
It was either their mom or their dad.
Do you remember how you learned that their grandmother would be picking them up?
Gavin came in and handed us a note from his parents.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Thank you. I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 90. Do you recognize that?
I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That's the note we were given.
Up on the screen, is that a larger version of State's Exhibit 90?
It is.
So this is the note that Gavin handed in regarding his grandmother picking him up on April 4th?
Yes.
Now, I believe you already testified to this, but what time does the after-school program end?
6 p.m.
Were the children picked up by 6 p.m.?
They were not.
When the children's grandmother was not there by 6 p.m., do you remember what happened?
Yes.
And what was that?
I waited a few extra minutes because sometimes there's traffic, and then I called the grandmother with this number.
Without getting into the substance of that conversation, can you describe the grandmother's tone during that call?
She was surprised. She wasn't aware of what was going on.
Did the grandmother come to pick up Ella and Gavin Argie that day?
She did.
Did she come right to the after-school entrance?
No, she originally went to our main branch.
So she went to a complete separate building to pick up the children?
Yes.
But eventually, she did come to the Matthew Thornton Elementary School to pick them up?
Yes.
Does the YMCA after-school program at the Matthew Thornton Elementary School have video surveillance?
It does.
I'm showing you State's Exhibit 12. Do you recognize this CD?
I do.
And how do you recognize that?
It has my initials right there from viewing it previously.
Okay, so those initials indicate that you viewed this video previously?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And when you viewed that video, is that a fair and accurate description of the after-school pickup from April 4th, 2019?
Yes.
All right, so at this point, I'm going to play a little over a minute of State's Exhibit 12 for the jury, and then I'll have some questions for you about that, okay? Okay, at this point, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 36. Do you recognize these pictures?
Yes,
How do you recognize these?
they were part of the video.
Okay, so these are still images from the video that we just watched?
Yes,
And do you see those pictures up in a larger version on the screen here?
yes.
Okay, so let's talk about these pictures a little bit. So we'll start with the picture on the top left. So this picture right here.
Mhm.
Can you identify for the jury who this person is here?
That's Natalie. She was an assistant group lead with us.
Okay, and who are the children with Natalie?
That's Gavin and Ella Argie.
Okay. And now let's look at this picture here on the bottom left. Can you identify who this person is here in the plaid shirt?
That's me.
Okay. And you're standing next to the person that you also identified working for the YMCA?
Yes.
And who are you speaking with here in this picture?
I'm speaking with the children's grandmother.
Now let's look at this picture on the right-hand side here. And can you tell the jury what we're seeing in this picture?
That's a close-up of the grandmother after signing out the kids or just before signing out the kids.
Now, when the grandmother, Miss Quinn, arrived at the after-school entrance, do you remember having some conversation with her?
I do.
Do you remember if she asked you anything?
I believe she wanted to see the note.
And based on that request, did you show her the note?
I believe I did.
Without telling me what she said in response, did you make any observations of her while she looked at that note?
I noticed that she seemed confused as well, and still a little surprised.
Looking at this picture of Ms. Quinn that's enlarged on the screen, is this a fair and accurate depiction of how she appeared when you were talking with her that evening?
Yes.
And what time ultimately, if you remember, did Ms. Quinn arrive to pick up Gavin and Ella Argie on April 4th?
I believe it was around 6:30-ish, 6:40-ish.
All right, thank you very much. I have no further questions. Defense counsel may have some questions for you.
Any cross-examination? Okay, and may this witness be excused by both sides?
Yes, Your Honor.
And from the defense? Yes. You can step down, you can stay, or leave as you choose. Thank you.
State next calls Dan Larochelle, Judge.
And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, while waiting for this next witness to come in, I wanted you to know that the exhibits that you've seen thus far, unless I tell you otherwise, they have been admitted into evidence without objection from the defense. So that's why you're not hearing a discussion back and forth about it. They were pre-marked before the start of the trial, and there was an agreement on certain exhibits being entered without objection. And sir, if you don't mind raising your right hand so I can swear you in. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to provide this court and jury shall be the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? Thank you. Why don't you have a seat? And once you get close enough to that microphone, if you could state your full name for our recorder and spell your last name.
Dan Larochelle, Larochelle.
Thank you, Mr. Larochelle. And if you don't mind keeping you don't have to get that close to the microphone, but you do
Sure.
have to amplify your voice a little
Okay.
bit more, okay? Thank you so much.
Yep,
Sir, you know the defendant, Mr. Argie.
I do.
I do need you to identify him for the record, please.
Right.
Okay. May the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant, Mr. Argie.
It will.
Sir, how would you describe your relationship with the defendant up until about March of 2018?
We've been friends since high school.
And so in 2018, for about how long had you been friends with the defendant? About.
20 years?
Over the last few years of your friendship with the defendant, were you aware that he gambled?
Yes.
Did you participate in any of those gambling activities with the defendant?
No.
Who are other friends of the defendant besides yourself?
Danny Tanguay, Ray Karen, TJ DiGentramasso.
From your friendship with the defendant, did you meet and come to know his wife, Maureen Argie?
Yes, very well.
From your friendship with the defendant, did you also meet and come to know his mother, Brenda Quinn?
Yes.
For about how long had you known the defendant's mother for in 2018? Again, about.
About, yeah, probably 25, 30 years, yeah.
From your observations of interactions between the defendant and his mother, how would you describe their relationship?
They tolerated each other.
From your own observations of the defendant and their mother and his mother, did they have a close relationship that you saw?
Yes, they did.
I want to turn your attention to about March of 2018. Did your relationship with the defendant, Mr. Argie, change at that time?
Yes.
Was there a particular incident or event that brought about that change in your relationship with the defendant?
Yes, we had an intervention.
And when you say we had an intervention, first, who is the intervention for?
It was for Bill.
And who participated in this intervention for the defendant besides yourself that you remember?
Maureen was there, his mother was there, his two sisters, Karen and Kelly, and Ray, Karen.
And what was the purpose of that intervention, sir?
He just needed to reset his life. He was out of control, bankrupt, in debt, had a ton of problems, and he just needed to reset.
And when you say he, you're referring again to the defendant, Mr. Argie? Yes?
Yes.
Was a topic of that intervention by you and others in about March of 2018 the defendant's gambling?
Yes.
And what did you know of the defendant's gambling at that time?
I just knew he lost a lot of money. I've heard reports from some of my other friends, specifically the friends that worked at the bar.
With respect to your own conversations with the defendant, what did you know his financial problems or gambling problems to be?
He lost a lot of money.
Was money of particular importance to the defendant based on conversations that you had with him over the years?
It was the most important thing to him.
Money was the most important thing to the defendant?
Absolutely.
Was another reason or topic for this intervention held for the defendant in about March of 2018?
Objection, Your Honor, maybe.
Well, I'm developing testimony.
I'll allow it at this point.
Was another reason or topic of this intervention things that the defendant would say about his wife, Maureen?
Yes.
What conversations did the defendant have with you that caused you concern?
He said he wanted to leave her, and he was very upset that she wouldn't come with him down south, and he was unhappy.
With respect to going down south, if you can explain that a little further based on your conversations, who wanted to go down south and why?
Bill wanted to go down south because he had a couple job offers down there for a lot of money, almost double what he was making here, and it would be very lucrative for him to go down there and live. He's from Tennessee.
And according to the defendant, what was the issue with his wife with respect to these plans?
His wife didn't want to go.
And what was the defendant's reaction? How would he talk about this, that his wife wouldn't allow him to move down south?
Again, he was very upset. He wanted to leave her. He was trying to figure out how he was going to get what he wanted.
Was this more than one conversation that you had with the defendant in which you would talk about his unhappiness with his marriage to Maureen?
Yes.
For about how long had the defendant expressed dissatisfaction with his marriage to Maureen to you? About?
3, 4, 5 years.
Did the defendant also, in conversations with you, talk about killing his wife, Maureen?
He did.
And about when did those conversations occur in relation to the intervention in March of 2018?
In the year or two prior to that.
What did the defendant say to you in those conversations that you remember, killing his wife?
He basically, you know, part of the conversation was, all right, Bill, you're gonna go down to South. Maureen's not gonna go. She's gonna take half of everything. So you're gonna make twice as much money, but you're gonna write a check right back to Maureen up here. And he didn't want to hear any of that.
And with respect to killing his wife, what would he say about that?
Again, he said, I'll do it, or I'll hire somebody, or I'll, you know what I mean?
So employment and money issues were reasons the defendant talked to you about killing his wife?
Yeah.
What about the kids? Was the kids also another reason?
He loved his kids. He just, you know, he wanted them. It was like possessions.
What about paying child support for him based on conversations that he had with you?
He wouldn't do. It was unacceptable to him. It was losing money.
What else do you recall the defendant saying about how he would carry out killing his wife that you remember?
Again, if he didn't do it, he'd hire somebody.
And did he talk about anyone in particular?
No.
Do you remember anything else about the conversation about hiring somebody?
No.
You were interviewed a couple of times by investigators in this case?
Yes.
Would a review of the transcript of one of your interviews possibly refresh your recollection as to this particular issue?
Sure.
So, counsel, this is the transcribed interview from June 17th of 2019. And I'll refer the witness to page 6, correct?
Yes.
So, sir, what I'll have you do is I'll have you read page 6 of this transcript, but feel free to read any portion beforehand and afterwards. Read it to yourself.
Yeah.
And when you're done, look up and I'll have some follow-up questions for you.
Okay. Okay.
Reviewing that portion of transcript, does that refresh your recollection as to anything else the defendant said to you about how he would commit his wife's killing or who he would get to do that for him?
Yes. You know what I mean? He had mentioned I'll have a friend do it.
Was this more than one conversation in which the defendant talked to you about killing his wife, Maureen?
Yeah.
And what was the defendant's demeanor when he would talk about being unhappy in his marriage and killing his wife, Maureen?
He was agitated and very upset.
Was he joking?
No.
We had talked about that planned intervention in March of 2018. Did that intervention in fact occur?
It did.
What was the defendant's reaction in response to that intervention?
He never wanted to see me again.
And he ended contact with you after that intervention?
That's correct.
And again, for about how long had you been friends with the defendant up to that
Again,
point?
since high school,
Decades.
25, 30 years, easy.
So Larochelle, I'm placing State's Exhibit 91 on the screen. It's a calendar. I want to turn your attention to April 1st, 2019, a few days before Maureen Argie's untimely death. On April 1st, did you receive text messages from the defendant?
I did.
Who initially reached out to who in these text messages?
Bill reached out to me.
Were you expecting to be contacted by the defendant?
No, we're not.
About when had been your last contact with the defendant prior to that communication on April 1st? About?
Over the summer. At Ray's wedding.
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
At Ray's wedding.
And this is your friend Ray Karen, who
Yep.
you had talked about before?
Yep.
At the time of those contacts with the defendant on April 1st, was your cell phone number 603-440-4054?
It was. It is.
So we'll go to the next slide. And these are entries on State's Exhibit 43, cell phone records for the cell phone belonging to the defendant, Mr. Argie. It shows a call made from his cell phone to your cell phone at about 4:07 on March 31st, lasting about 33 seconds. Do you recall receiving any calls from the defendant at this time period?
If I did, it went to voicemail.
Let's continue on with State's Exhibit 43. And now we'll go into the next day, which is April 1st. And the chart shows a series of 6 text messages between your cell phone and the defendant's cell phone, beginning at about 11:21 a.m. The highlighted messages right here. And they ended about 11:28 a.m. Do you recall having a text message conversation with the defendant on April 1st?
I do.
Did you save those text messages on your cell phone?
I did.
When asked to do so, did you provide investigators with those text messages?
I did.
So now let's go to State's Exhibit 49. Are those the text messages that you sent to investigators upon request?
Yep.
And can you see those from there? I can also give you a
I
picture.
can.
The top 3 text messages about golf. This one, and this one. They were all sent and received before April 1st?
Yep.
And you said that your last conversation with the defendant was about that previous summer. Would that be about when those text messages were sent?
Yeah.
So let me read the text messages from April 1st, and then I'll have some follow-up questions. First beginning at 11:21 a.m. Been a while, but wanted to make amends with you if you're willing. Who is this? Billy. New number. I am in Germany this week for an automation fair. It would be good to reconnect. I hope all is well. Kay, have fun. Be careful over there. Okay. Been a while, but wanted to make amends with you if you're willing. Who sent that text message to who?
Bill sent that to me.
Did you ever receive any further communication from the defendant after you received these text messages from him on April 1st about making amends?
No.
One moment. I have no further questions. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Any cross-exam?
Good morning, Mr. Larochelle. I'm attorney 9, represent Bill Argie. I want to talk to you about threats you say that Mr. Argie made to you. You say that he said something to the effect that he wanted to kill her. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you say that he said it in anger. Is that right?
Yep.
And you say that it happened at least a year or so before the intervention.
The conversation had it a couple of times, yes.
And so you're talking like back to 2017.
Yeah.
And 2017, you're out on the golf course and he's talking like this.
Yeah.
In the golf course where guys get together,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And the guys talk about each other's personal lives.
Yeah.
And when you would probably play with Ray, Karen,
Yeah.
and you had conversations about your personal lives.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Larochelle,
Yeah.
because we're recording it, you
So
just
yes?
need to say yes or no.
Okay, no
and
problem.
I can tell what you're answering, but the record will be unclear. Thank you.
Okay.
So if you don't mind just answering that
Yes.
question. Thank you.
And after you heard this so-called threat, you didn't call the police.
No.
You didn't walk off the golf course and call Maureen.
No.
You didn't document it in a calendar or notes or something that, hey, my friend just threatened to commit the crime of murder. Didn't do anything like that.
No.
And then at the intervention, by the way, the intervention, was there any trained counselors there?
No, we tried to get one.
And so no one who was there was trained.
No.
And when you say we, who's we?
Me and Maureen.
And where did you attempt to get one?
We called a bunch of social services. Maureen was a social worker. We called the hospital. We called the police department. We called a variety of things to try and get him some services and what our options were.
And what did Maureen say?
I don't think the witness finished answering the question.
Go ahead. I have hard of hearing, so I didn't hear you last
Okay.
part.
Yeah, we really searched for a while to find him, to figure out what this would look like. I've never done an intervention before, but I thought it was important and it needed to be done. So we did it.
Okay. And what did you, so are you saying that Maureen organized the intervention?
She was one of the people, yeah.
Who's the other people?
Ray, Karen, the two sisters. Ray, Karen, the two sisters, his mother. We were all kind of involved trying to figure out how we can help him.
And how did you meet to talk about how you were going to help him?
We met at Brenda's house.
Pardon me?
We met at his mother's house,
Okay. And then where was the intervention?
at Billy's house.
It was just on the same day?
No.
And when you met at his mother's house, what was the primary concern being talked about for Bill?
Well, his gambling, his infidelity, there was a variety of his drinking. He was out of control.
So gambling, so it's addiction.
Yeah.
And you also, at times when he was with you, he threatened to commit suicide himself.
Yep.
And that had you concerned.
It did.
And that happened around the time of the intervention.
Yeah.
And when you were at the intervention, did you say anything about his threats to so-called kill anyone?
No, this was about helping Bill.
So just so that I understand, you had not been part of Bill's life since really March of 2018.
Yeah, I saw, in June, we saw him at Ray's wedding.
And when you saw him at Ray's wedding, he looked fine.
Not really.
He was with Maureen,
Yeah?
and you didn't see that anything was, did anything that they tell you lead you to believe, or how they were acting lead you to believe that there's anything wrong?
She was uncomfortable. She didn't talk very much at the wedding. She kind of said everything was okay. Yeah, and, yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about your relationship with Maureen. You said you were close with her,
Yeah,
and you hadn't talked to her since that wedding.
correct.
And before that, you hadn't talked to her since the intervention.
Yeah,
So you never checked in on her.
no,
And so you're saying somebody threatened to commit suicide against a friend, a person you consider to be a close friend, and you never checked in on her.
say that again?
Did you understand my question?
No,
You're saying that Mr. Argie threatened to kill his wife,
yeah,
and you consider his wife a friend of yours,
yeah,
and you never checked in with her since March of 2018.
I did everything I could to help both Bill and Maureen out as best I could. It was very evident that neither one of them wanted my help. I did the best I could.
Okay, so it's fair to say you didn't do anything since March of 2018?
No,
No, it's not fair to say, or yes, it's fair to say?
yeah, it's fair to say.
By the way, when Bill sent you a text in March 31, 2019,
Yeah,
you were in Germany,
I was.
and when were you expected to get back from Germany at that time?
The following weekend.
Okay, so you weren't even around
No.
the rest of that week
Nope,
when Maureen died.
correct.
You never witnessed Bill being violent towards Maureen? Physically violent?
No,
And it's fair to say, in the years since his marriage to Maureen, you spent most of the time with Bill.
correct.
And it's also fair to say that when you did see Maureen, that she is quiet.
Yes,
She doesn't share her personal problems.
yeah.
If I may have a moment, Your Honor.
Of course, yes.
Thank
Okay.
you. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes. Getting back to the threats that you heard the defendant make against his wife's life, on cross-examination, you were asked if you reported it to police, and you said you did not report those death threats.
Yeah.
With respect to the intervention, did you make sure to take steps to ensure Maureen Argie's safety as part of that intervention?
We were trying to. We were hoping that he would go away, he'd be admitted, and that we would get her out of the house with the kids.
So those are among the steps you took to ensure Maureen's safety as part of the intervention?
Yeah,
And was part of the reasons for taking those steps, the threats that you heard the defendant make against her?
yeah, I was nervous what he would do.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Larochelle, so I assume that you told Maureen that he made threats against her.
I told Maureen she was in trouble.
And her reaction was she did not feel like she was in trouble, that he would not harm her.
She said Billy would never hurt me. And I'm like, Maureen, you're wrong.
Thank you.
May this witness be released, Judge?
Any objection? Sir, you can step down, you can stay or leave as you choose. Thank you.
State next calls Meghan Santos, Judge.
If you could raise your right hand, I'll swear you in. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to provide this court and jury shall be the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? Thank you. And once you get seated and comfortable in that chair and close enough to the microphone, could you provide your full name to our court reporter and spell your last name?
Sure. Meghan Santos, S-A-N-T-O-S.
Thank you.
Ms. Santos, what do you do for work?
I'm a research manager at Dartmouth Hitchcock.
And for about how long have you held that position? About?
Since 2003.
In 2019, did you know Maureen Argie?
Yes.
And how did you know her?
We were friends.
For about how long had you and Maureen been friends in 2019? About?
Since 1997. 20 years.
So about 20 years?
Mm-hmm.
And last witness did this as well. You got to answer yes or no. You can't take mm-hs.
Okay.
So the answer was yes, about
Yes.
20 years.
Yeah.
State's Exhibit 59, is this Maureen?
Yes.
Does this fairly depict her appearance in 2019?
Yes.
How would you describe your relationship with Maureen?
We were close friends.
Did you keep in regular contact with Maureen over the many years that she was your friend?
Yes.
How so?
By phone, we saw each other, spent time with our children together.
What types of activities would you do with Maureen over the years?
More recently, when we had kids, we did stuff with the kids, like go, I don't know, apple picking, or we'd meet up at a park or something like that.
Did you have the kind of relationship with Maureen in which you'd share with each other your turmoils as well as the triumphs in your lives?
Yes.
Whether they be personal or professional turmoils and triumphs?
Yes.
From your interaction with Maureen and what you saw, did she have any long-term health or medical issues during your friendship with her?
No.
Was Maureen ever hospitalized for illness or medical condition during your friendship with her other than related to pregnancies?
No.
Excuse me. Over the many years that you knew Maureen, that you spoke with her, that you interacted with her, how would you describe to the jurors her general demeanor?
Quiet, funny, generous with the people around her.
You've also described her as sad. How so?
She was sad because she was not sure if she was going to stay married.
From your interactions and discussions with Maureen, did that appear to be the source of her sadness?
Yes.
Based on your many conversations with your friend, your many interactions with her over the years, at any point in the many years that you knew Maureen, did you ever have any concerns that she may try to harm herself or
No.
be suicidal?
No.
And why do you say that?
She just was really committed to her family, committed to her children.
With respect to Maureen, based on your interactions with her over the years in various different social settings, would you agree with the following statement, Maureen drank a lot?
No.
And why not?
Well, outside of college, I didn't see her drink that often.
And then
That was a long time ago.
20 years.
Yes.
Who else were Maureen's close friends besides yourself?
Kelly Hobbs, and then she had a friend named Cindy that I met a couple of times. That's a more recent friend.
At the time of Maureen's untimely death in April of 2019, was she married?
Yes.
And to who was she married to?
Bill, William?
And do you see Bill in the courtroom here today?
Yes.
I do need you to identify him for us, please.
He's sitting right there.
May the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant?
It will.
At the time of Maureen's death, where did she and the defendant live?
In Londonderry,
And do you remember what road in Londonderry?
West Road?
Did they have children?
Yes.
And who were their children?
Ella and Gavin?
And about how old were those two children in April of 2019?
6 and 9-ish?
From your time as close friends with Maureen, you saw her interact with children, her
Yes.
children? And I think you talked about some of the situations in which you would see Maureen interact with the children. You talked about going on trips together?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
And that would be you and Maureen and your children and her children?
Yes.
From the times that you spent with Maureen and her children, what generally did you see with respect to their relationship?
She was very proud of them. She thought they were hilarious. She was gentle.
Would Maureen also talk to you about her children?
Yes,
From what you saw with Maureen and her kids, was she a loving mother?
absolutely. Yes.
Was she an attentive mother?
Yes.
Was she a committed mother?
Yes.
And why do you say all that?
She was kind of holding down the fort. She,
And when you say holding down the fort, is that with respect to the marriage?
the marriage, everything, taking care of the children.
From what you saw of Maureen's interaction with her children, discussions that you had with Maureen in the weeks before her untimely death, did she have any intention of leaving her kids?
No.
In 2019, did Maureen have a job?
Yes.
And what was that job that you remember?
She worked as a social worker at Elder Services,
And was that in New Hampshire or elsewhere? If you remember.
Massachusetts.
For about how long had Maureen had that job? About.
15, more than that, I think, years.
Was that full-time employment?
Yes.
Did Maureen have a cell phone?
Yes.
Earlier in your testimony, you talked about how you would keep in touch with Maureen over the years, and one of the ways was by phone? Yes?
Yes.
I want to show you State's Exhibit 42 on the screen. It may be hard to read, but there's a number by her name. It's 978-884-4418. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yes.
And was that Maureen's cell phone number in 2019?
Yes.
So let's focus on March of 2019 and the weeks before Maureen's untimely death. Did she talk to you in those weeks about the state of her marriage with the defendant?
Yes.
And what did Maureen indicate to you in conversations you had with her about her intentions with respect to the marriage?
That she was going to file for divorce.
What Maureen was talking to you about, ending the marriage with the defendant, was that something new that came from her in March of 2019?
No.
And for about how long had Maureen been expressing dissatisfaction in her marriage to the defendant with you? About?
3 years.
And in March, she talked again about how she was actually going forward with the divorce?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that she gave Maureen paperwork.
Did she also talk to you about her plans moving forward, her life apart from the defendant?
Yes.
And what do you recall Maureen telling you about her plans apart from the defendant?
That she was going to temporarily move in with her mother-in-law with the kids.
that Maureen was going to move in with the kids to her mother-in-law's
Yes.
house?
Correct.
I want to direct your attention to the day when you last verbally spoke to Maureen. Do you recall what day that was?
It was the 28th, I believe.
So looking at the calendar, it's Thursday, March 28th.
Yeah. It could have, sorry, it could have been the 29th.
But one of those days.
Yes.
This next exhibit looks a little complicated. It's from State's Exhibit 8, which are phone records for Maureen Argie's cell phone number. It indicates a call placed on March 28th at about 12:30. It says 8:30. The jury is going to be hearing about the time difference for about 770 seconds. And the number is Maureen's number, 4418, and the other number is 603-860-7625. That number, 7625, was that your telephone number back in April of 2019?
Yes.
770 seconds, I checked it, it's about 13 minutes. Does that appear to be the last time you ever spoke with your friend?
Yes, we texted after that.
But in terms of physically
Yeah.
speaking?
Mhm.
During that call, was one of the things that Maureen talked to you about her plans with respect to moving forward from the marriage?
Yes.
What was Maureen's demeanor when she told you in substance that she had filed divorce paperwork, she was planning on divorcing the defendant, moving out with the kids into his mother-in-law's house?
She was worried.
Worried how so? Well, let me ask it this way. Was she worried about safety herself in terms of suicide?
No.
And was that very clear to you based on
Yeah.
conversations? With respect to what Maureen was telling you about her plans moving forward, her intentions moving forward, were you supportive of her decisions?
Yes.
And did you express that to your friend?
Yes.
Were you also expressing support when she talked about these future plans?
Yes.
And how were you expressing support for your friend?
I told her that I could watch the kids if she needed help moving, I would help her. That if she needed to talk, I was there.
Later that same day, March 28th, did you have a text message conversation with Maureen using your cell phones?
Yes.
Did you save those text message conversations with you and Maureen by cell phones?
Yes.
And after Maureen's death, did you provide to investigators those sent and received text messages with Maureen?
Yes.
For identification, approach structure.
You may.
Showing you 96, State's Exhibit 96 for identification. If you can just look at those, and I believe we've looked at them before, but if you can just verify that those are text messages between you and Maureen.
Yes.
With respect to the communications, the conversation that you had with your friend through text messages, did that include several text messages back and forth between the two of you?
Yes.
From what Maureen wrote to you, did you have any concern that she may try to harm herself?
No.
Was there anything in your communications with Maureen by calls or by text in the weeks before her untimely death that raised any concerns that she may try to harm herself?
No.
As part of those communications, those text message communications on March 28th, did Maureen write about checking the house to make sure there were no firearms in the house?
Yes.
Was what Maureen wrote to you on March 28th in looking for firearms, was that in the context of her expressing thoughts that she may try to use a firearm against herself?
No.
Was that in the context of making sure that the defendant did not have access to firearms.
Yes.
One moment. No further questions, thank you.
Any cross?
Ms. Santos, I want to pick up where the state left off and talk with you about your conversations with Maureen in late March 2019. You said the last time the two of you spoke was March 28th,
Yes.
and at that time, you had a conversation with Maureen about checking the house for firearms. Is that right?
No.
Or you texted with Maureen about checking the house for firearms. Maureen was not concerned about her own well-being.
Correct.
You weren't concerned she was going to harm herself.
Correct.
Maureen was concerned about Bill's well-being, correct?
Yes.
She was concerned that Bill might harm himself.
Yes.
In fact, Bill had been threatening suicide.
Well, objection, I believe this is hearsay.
And any response?
No. don't.
Okay, the objection sustained.
Maureen was worried about, Maureen was worried that Bill might harm himself, correct?
Yes.
And she wanted your advice.
I'm sorry?
She wanted your advice
Correct.
about what to do if he should threaten to harm himself.
Yes.
You had a background in mental health.
Yes.
You knew the sorts of signs to look for that a person might be about to harm themselves.
Yes.
And your advice to a person in that situation was to call the police.
Correct.
If Bill were to threaten to harm himself, Maureen should call the police.
Correct.
That was your advice to her on March 28th?
Yes.
Now, back in March 2019, you said Maureen was planning to leave Bill.
Yes.
And this was not a surprise to you.
No.
Maureen had been discussing her unhappiness for several years.
Yes.
You thought she'd been unhappy for maybe 3 years,
Yes.
and she had been talking about filing for divorce for some time before March. Is that right?
I think so, yes.
She had been considering leaving Bill,
Yes.
and she would discuss this with you.
Yes.
And in March, you were supportive of her plan to leave Bill. Is that right?
Yes.
And you encouraged her to leave Bill before March. Is that right?
I don't remember.
When
That I
Maureen would
encouraged
speak with
her.
you about her unhappiness in the marriage, you didn't pressure her to stay married.
No.
You wanted her to leave Bill.
I wanted her to be happy.
Okay. Now, you were friends with Maureen for about 20 years, you said.
Yes.
So the entire time you knew Maureen, she was with Bill?
No.
Okay. So Bill and Maureen met after you and Maureen were already friends.
Correct.
And during those 20 years, you were mostly friends with Maureen, right?
Yes.
You weren't close with Bill.
No.
Did you particularly like Bill?
No, we didn't really gel.
You didn't, Joe?
Yeah.
No. You thought he was loud.
Yeah.
You thought he was obnoxious.
Sometimes.
You thought he could be pig-headed.
Yeah.
You thought he talked about himself too much.
I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe.
But you didn't like the way he treated Maureen. Fair to say?
Correct.
Now, back in March of 2019, when Maureen was planning to leave Bill, you were aware of her plans going forward.
Yes,
She was going to be moving to Manchester,
yes,
into Bill's mother's home.
yep.
You said that was a temporary move. Did she have plans for how long that might be?
I don't think she'd gotten that far, no.
She hadn't gotten that far. And why was she going to move in with Brenda instead of to something more permanent?
I think the finances were an issue.
What do you mean by that? Finances were an issue?
I don't really know the details, but that was the impression I got, that she didn't feel like she could make a final move right away because of finances.
Okay, so she couldn't afford a down payment on a house? Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean,
You
they had a house, so.
Right, right. But a house that they were going to put on the market, is that right?
I don't know.
You described Maureen as, quote, holding down the fort. She was primarily responsible for taking care of the kids.
Yes, and working,
She worked
holding a
full-time.
job, yep,
She was a social worker.
yep.
Did she feel like she could rely on Bill for help with the kids?
No,
No. And you and Maureen were close.
yeah,
You saw each other regularly.
yeah,
You talked regularly.
yeah,
Maureen would confide in you.
yes,
She would tell you about her marriage.
yes,
She would tell you about her unhappiness.
yes,
She told you about her worries about Bill,
yes,
about his mental health.
yep.
Maureen never told you that Bill was physically violent with her.
No,
You never saw her with bruises or visible injuries.
no,
Maureen never told you that she was afraid for her own safety.
she said that he postured one time in a
postured.
doorway.
Okay. But Maureen never showed up unannounced, needing a safe place to stay.
No,
She never asked you about domestic violence resources.
no,
But you worried about Maureen, right?
I did, yeah,
You worried about her safety,
I did,
and you asked her if she was safe at home,
correct.
and she told you she was safe.
She said she felt safe.
She felt safe.
Mhm.
Okay. One moment. Nothing better.
Any redirect?
Yeah, she qualified it when she said she felt safe, right?
Yes,
And one of the qualifications is that she checked the house to make sure her husband didn't have access to weapons, right?
correct,
And the other qualification was she was told to tell him that she would call the police if he threatened her, right?
correct.
Thank you.
Any recross?
No.
Okay, and may this witness be excused by both sides?
Yes, Judge.
Okay, thank you. You can step down, you can stay or leave as you choose. And ladies and gentlemen, and since we're now at around 12:06, give or take, why don't we break for our luncheon recess? If I could have everyone back at 5 past the hour, that'd be great.
All right.
And counsel, because of the development of that examination of the witness, I determined that a curative instruction did not appear to be appropriate or necessary, and so that's why I didn't give it. Thank you. And counsel, in terms of moving the table, I have reached out to court staff about that issue, so we'll get back in touch with you. I believe we can move one of the tables out, so. Okay.
We'll defer it to the court. It doesn't matter to us.
Sure. Okay, thank you.